According to some people, there is a small group, literally, they are small, who apparently are slowly taking control of one household at a time. Who are these people, you might ask? Our children. You think I kid, but this is actually a serious problem. My next guest, Cathy Gulli, has started a firestorm of discussion around this issue. In January, Maclean's posted her article entitled "The Collapse of Parenting: Why It's Time for Parents to Grow Up." This article questions the growing trend of many parents relinquishing parental control in their household in order to make sure their kids feel empowered and avoid conflict. What's the result? Some would say anarchy. Let's delve into this a little bit more. Welcome, Cathy.
Thanks for having me.
So why were you motivated to write this article that started a firestorm of conversation?
I mean, parenting is one of those topics that is always, a hot one, and everyone has an opinion, and everyone has questions, even more importantly. And so we decided to tackle that. There's a new book that just came out by an American family physician and psychologist, Leonard Sachs, and he wrote a book called The Collapse of Parenting. And so we used that sort of as a jumping off point and spoke with lots of other experts in Canada as well about what they're seeing in terms of parents and their relationship with their children. And so that's how the story came to be. And
you got a lot of comments. I was reading some of the comments online. First of all, like record sharing, everybody was tweeting this article. How many shares?
Yeah, over 1.5 million readers so far and growing. I mean, it really has gone viral, and I think that speaks to how important it is to be talking about this and how the struggle is real. People really do every day, day in and day out with their children wonder, am I doing a good job here? Am I doing the best for my children? And so that's, I think that explains why it's become so popular.
And so as I read the comments, some people thought it was great. They're applauding this article. Some people thought, what's the issue here? And so how have you kind of responded to some of these comments? Because they've been a little interesting in themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you write a story, you open yourself up to all kinds of comments, and I try not to take them personal, that's for sure. I am no expert on parenting. I wrote this story as much for myself as anybody else. And I think that what the comments speak to is, that it's a very loaded topic, it's a delicate topic, and really at the end of the day, I think most parents would say that they just want the best for their children, but the question is, what does that look like? Yeah.
So we start off in your article at the dinner table, which I think is probably ground zero for a lot of wars that we have with our children every day, trying to get the peas in and the broccoli down. But it becomes a struggle where sometimes parents give in.
Yeah, I mean, food actually is one of those things that I think a lot of people can relate to. You're gathered around the table and you want your child to eat something that they don't want to eat. You might wind up becoming a short order cook, cooking anything, eat anything, what can I make you? And so, while it kind of sounds like a relatively trite example of this power struggle between parents and children, the experts that I spoke with talked about how it's often the first thing to slide in a family that is struggling with delineating who's in charge. And the reason that food is so important when it comes to who's in charge is because it symbolizes nurturance. Not only are we literally nurturing our children when we feed them, but it also symbolizes our ability to take care of them. And so when we allow them to take the lead on dinner, for example, it, in a way, is kind of sending a signal to our children that they are in the driver's seat, and that can give a child a great sense of anxiety because at the end of the day, they want a leader, and that's our job as parents. The other thing that I thought was really interesting in the topic of food was about, this thing that a lot of parents do, certainly I have done, where, no matter where we go, we have a canteen of water and a bag of goodies with us. And, we do this as parents because we want to satisfy our children literally. Again, you're hungry, you're thirsty, even if we're only going 20 minutes in the car, here's something. But it also, again, symbolizes our need to satisfy them and to please them. And again, whatever we're doing on a day-to-day basis, we need to be asking ourselves, why are we doing this? And what is the message? And what is my child hearing and receiving in the way that I'm interacting with them?
And it's not just that, it's also nutritional value. I know my kids, I don't know about yours, but they would choose fries and nuggets probably every night if they had a choice, right?
Sure.
And there's also an expert that you cite in your article that says that even sleep deprivation can also affect a child. If you're allowing your child to go to bed whenever he or she wants to, these all kind of culminate, right?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, whether we're talking about food, whether we're talking about sleep, at the heart of all of this is this desire among children to speak their voice, and this desire among parents to give their child a voice. And I think this is a really unique phenomenon for parents today, insofar as, for the last several decades, there have been huge strides made in society to empower people, minority groups of every category. We want to give people equal rights and a fair voice. And so, probably with the best of intentions, this model has been applied to children. And therein lies the rub, because the experts that I spoke to talked about how the one core, the way a family works goes against the one social construct which we are working so hard to dismantle, which is hierarchy. Children need hierarchy, families need hierarchies, and parents have to be at the top of that triangle. And so I think that explains the social phenomenon that we're seeing. So it's not just happening on the micro, what's going on in your home, but it's what's happening across North America. And why are we doing this, and what is the philosophies that we're applying to our children? And so, like I said, I think it's all being done with the best of intentions. We want to give our children a voice and independence and autonomy, but where is the best place to exert that? If a child wants to choose what color pants they wear, by all means. But there are limits on the choices that they get to make, and I think that's the struggle a lot of parents have, including myself, on a day-to-day basis.
And I think it's also parents knowing what maybe they experienced as children and wanting better for their child, right? Wanting to change things for their children.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, again, people that I spoke to highlighted a really important point, which is so many parents want to parent in a way that maybe they didn't receive. They might not have had much of a voice in their home. They might not have felt respected. And so they might not have felt like their emotions were given space in the home. And so a lot of parents today want to do things differently. And there was one psychologist or family therapist who I spoke with that put it really beautifully, actually, I thought. She said, it's like we're trying to do the emotion coaching without having received the training, as if we're teaching them French, but we're reading it in the textbook at the same time. And I think that that's a very real challenge for parents. How do I make my child feel heard without giving them too much say? And so I think that's a big part of it as well.
How much does parental books and social media also play a role in this? Because on social media, as we were chatting about before we came on, there's the comparisons. Oh, Sally's, daughter's doing this. Why isn't my child doing this? And then there's also all these parenting books that you have, and you want your kid to be the best kid possible.
Yeah.
And so you start comparing instead of just enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk about in the story this constant push and pull that I think our generation of parents feel, where, you're looking at Facebook, you're Googling, you're talking with friends and even strangers online about how they're doing things, what they're doing, what this means. And you want to know, am I doing this right? And that's a place where sometimes we get guidance, but sometimes that guidance is misguided, and it also leads us down a road of maybe feeling particularly self-conscious, or instead of taking it right back to the roots, which is your relationship with your child. And I think that's really at the heart of this is, at the end of the day, your child wants to be known by you in a very intimate way, and you want your child to know that at the end of the day they can come to you and they can look to you. And we need to be leading by example.
One of the family therapists in the article also said, we put a lot of pressure on our children. And I think that's a part of it, right? When we are putting a lot of the decision making on our child, we're putting pressure on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think kids probably internalize a lot of things that we do. And, we were talking about this earlier, how, every decision we make as parents often is done in an attempt for perfection. If we're going to buy a stroller, we're not buying any stroller. We're not just walking into the store. We're researching it online. We're finding out what other people have done. And, when you kind of extrapolate from that, it's like we're always seeking success, and there's no room for failure. And so that does create a pressure on ourselves, and it creates a pressure on our children. And so I think that you're right, that kids do feel pressure in the same way that their parents feel pressure.
The big takeaway at the end is, I think, kind of refreshing, telling parents that, step out of that zone of always being with your kids, be with other families, other friends, just get out of that circle and just maybe even see your family in a different perspective.
Yeah, there's two sides to that. On the one hand, we are so fixated on pleasing our children, sometimes in an effort to satisfy our own need for affection and adoration. So we look to our children for that, and we don't want to upset them because they're a source of our feel good.
Yeah.
And so, the psychologist I talked to said, you really need to be expanding and fortifying your adult relationships as a way of staving that off. But on the other hand, we want a real, intimate, and trusting relationship with our children. So it's not that we need to be distancing ourselves from our children. It's not that we need to be mean or cold or aloof. It's actually the exact opposite. It's that there needs to be a real sense of trust. Your child trusts that you really do know best for them. And as a consequence, they're going to be much more willing to listen to you, and you're going to feel more confident in your choices and telling them what they need to do.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Cathy.
Thanks for having me.
This is great. I mean, again, you started it. Here's the cover. It's time to stand up to your kids on the, what claims was this? This was in January 18th. So you'll want to pick up your copy.